So before we shift into what is guilt, let me ask,
Mhm.
one more piece of this in regards to shame. There's so much material out there that is talks about how, narcissism is a lot of times a mask for a shame-based system that's inside
Okay.
that person. And we've talked about it with the defense mechanisms and all of that. And so I just wondered your thoughts on this of, is a person who has been shamed and dealt with shaming throughout their childhood and kind of trapped in that shame belief, are they destined down a path of narcissism, or is there or are they destined down a path even of codependency, because that also being a defense mechanism against some of the shame? And so how do you think that that all plays out in regards to, that cycle that we're talking about from generation to generation?
That's such a good question. You know, when I talk of narcissism, I always try very hard to think of it in terms of narcissistic traits or characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
So if we think of it that way instead of like NPD, like the formal diagnosis,
Mm-hmm.
I would say yes, most likely we know there's enough research out there now to show, although we do it conversely, the opposite way you described it, but I don't see why it can't be bi-directional. But what I mean by that is there's enough research to show that in the childhood of many individuals who have these characteristics later in life, there was this shaming quality. There was this misattunement or misalignment, what I mentioned earlier, or
Mm-hmm.
this neglect or this abusive type of relationship. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, are they destined? That stuff's always hard to predict because it's possible, they definitely need to create, they need to use those defense mechanisms that I mentioned earlier, at least early on, to
Mm-hmm.
protect themselves. But because that's the way you adapt, right? You could
Right.
adapt by pleasing somebody else and give up your own sense of self worth.
Right.
But that doesn't mean along the way you won't meet a coach or have a very significant teacher or even
Mm-hmm.
the family of a good friend of yours who may not be functioning at that level and
Mm-hmm.
begin to take something away if you can internalize some of that. If there's enough
Absolutely.
of that and compared to what you're getting,
Yeah.
at home.